Leadership doesn't begin when others follow you. It begins when you stop being ruled by your own mind. Before anyone listens to your words, they feel your state. Before anyone trusts your direction, they sense your control. And before you ever lead people, you are already leading something far more difficult. Your thoughts, your emotions, your impulses, and your standards. This is the part of leadership no one talks about. Not the speeches, not the titles, not the authority given from the outside, but the quiet, invisible work of self-command. Because here is a truth that rarely gets said clearly. You can have intelligence without leadership. You can have confidence without leadership. You can even have power without leadership. But you cannot lead anyone consistently, calmly, or sustainably if you cannot lead yourself. Every breakdown in leadership begins internally, not with a bad decision, but with a moment of lost control, a reaction instead of a response, an emotion that went unchecked, a standard that was compromised, a moment where comfort was chosen over discipline. And once that happens, authority starts to leak. People may not say anything, they may not confront you, but they feel it. Leadership is not what you claim. It's what your presence communicates when you say nothing at all. This audiobook is not about managing others. It's not about motivation. It's not about charisma, influence tactics, or how to sound impressive. This is about something far more fundamental. Self-leadership, because self-leadership is the root system of all real authority. If the roots are weak, no amount of external success will keep the structure standing. If the roots are strong, even silence carries weight. Over the next 60 minutes, we are going to strip leadership down to its core. Not what looks good on the outside, but what actually holds when pressure shows up. You will learn how leadership is built through self-control, how emotional discipline creates calm authority, how standards, not moods, define who leads and who reacts, and why clarity inside the mind always comes before confidence in the world. You will not be asked to hype yourself up. You will not be told to believe harder or feel more motivated. Instead, you will be challenged to develop command. Command over your reactions, command over your inner dialogue, command over what you tolerate, what you allow, and what you repeat. Because leadership is not an act you perform, it is a state you maintain, and that state is built privately, long before it is ever seen publicly. Throughout this audiobook, we will move through 8 core principles of self-leadership. Each one is simple, but none of them are easy. Each one removes noise, excuses, and emotional clutter. And each one brings you closer to the kind of leadership that does not need to announce itself. You will learn why self-control is the first form of leadership. Why mastering your emotions matters more than expressing them. Why discipline outperforms motivation every time. Why standards, not titles, create authority. Why clarity sharpens confidence. Why leaders live in the pause between stimulus and response. Why consistency builds trust, starting with yourself. And finally, how becoming the person you respect internally is what makes others follow externally. This is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming steadier. It is not about proving anything. It is about removing the need to. Because the strongest leaders are not the most reactive. They are the most regulated. They do not rush to speak. They do not rush to defend. They do not rush to explain. They move with intention. They act from standards. And they lead first, internally. As you listen, don't rush. Let the ideas settle. Notice where resistance shows up. That resistance is information. If something here feels uncomfortable, that's not a problem. Discomfort is often the signal that growth is nearby. By the end of this audiobook, you won't be given a title. You won't be handed authority. But you will have something far more valuable. A framework for leading yourself when no one is watching. A way to remain grounded under pressure, and a standard you can return to again and again when the world gets loud. Because before you lead a team, before you lead a family, before you lead a business or a vision, you must lead yourself. And that is where we begin. Chapter 1. Self-control is the first form of leadership. Leadership does not begin with vision. It does not begin with confidence. And it certainly does not begin with influence. Leadership begins with self-control. Before anyone follows your direction, they feel your discipline. Before anyone trusts your decisions, they sense your stability. And before your words carry weight, your behavior has already spoken. Self-control is the foundation that everything else rests on. Without it, intelligence becomes reckless. Confidence becomes arrogance. Ambition becomes chaos. With it, even quiet actions feel authoritative. Self-control is not about suppressing who you are. It is about governing who you become in every moment that matters. Because every leadership failure starts the same way, with a moment of unchecked impulse, a reaction instead of a response, a tone that slips, a decision made too fast, a boundary that bends just this once. And in that moment, something subtle happens. You lose command, not over others, but over yourself. Leadership does not collapse loudly, it erodes quietly. Self-control is what prevents that erosion. It is the ability to pause when emotion rises, to hold position when pressure pushes, to remain steady when the situation invites chaos. This is why self-control is the first form of leadership. Not because it looks impressive, but because without it, nothing else lasts. Think about the leaders you respect most. Not the loud ones, not the dramatic ones, but the ones who remain composed when things go wrong. They do not rush. They do not flinch. They do not explain themselves excessively. Their calm is not accidental. It is trained. And that calm sends a signal stronger than words ever could. Self-control creates presence. Presence creates trust. Trust creates followership. Without self-control, your authority is fragile. With it, your authority becomes stable, even when circumstances aren't. Here is the part many people misunderstand. Self-control is not about avoiding emotion. You will still feel anger. You will still feel pressure. You will still feel frustration and doubt. Leadership does not require emotional numbness. It requires emotional command. There is a critical difference. Emotion is information. Impulse is a reaction. Self-control is the space between the two. And in that space, leadership lives. When you act immediately on emotion, you give power away. When you pause, you take power back. That pause does not need to be dramatic. Sometimes it is a single breath. Sometimes it is silence instead of explanation. Sometimes it is choosing not to respond at all. But every time you choose restraint, you reinforce authority inside yourself first. This is why leaders who lack self-control feel exhausting to be around. They pull energy instead of creating stability. They react instead of deciding. They move people emotionally, not directionally. Self-control changes that dynamic. It turns volatility into reliability, noise into clarity, reaction into intention, and intention is what separates leadership from impulse. Self-control also determines how seriously others take you. People watch what you tolerate. They notice what triggers you. They observe how quickly you are pulled off center, not consciously, but instinctively. Because leadership is not evaluated logically. It is felt. If you are easily shaken, people feel it. If you are emotionally predictable, people feel safe. If you are grounded, people trust your direction, even before you give it. This is not about dominance. It is about regulation. A leader who cannot regulate themselves forces others to regulate around them. A leader who can regulate themselves creates space for others to perform. This is why self-control is not passive. It is active leadership. Now here is the uncomfortable part. Self-control reveals who is actually in charge of your life. If your mood decides your actions, your mood is leading. If pressure decides your tone, pressure is leading. If other people's behavior controls your reactions, they are leading. Leadership begins when that stops. When you decide that your internal state is not up for negotiation. When you choose standards over impulses. When you refuse to let emotion make decisions for you. This does not make you cold. It makes you reliable. And reliability is one of the most underrated leadership traits there is. People follow those they can count on. Not those who feel intensely, but those who respond intentionally. So how do you begin building self-control? You start small, but you start deliberately. You practice pausing before reacting. You practice finishing what you start, even when you don't feel like it. You practice holding your tone steady, especially when you want to raise it. You practice saying less when emotion wants to say more. Every one of these is a leadership rep. Not visible, not celebrated, but powerful. Self-control is built the same way strength is built. Through repetition, through resistance, through choosing the harder response over the easier reaction. And the moment you stop relying on impulse, something shifts. Your mind quiets. Your presence deepens. Your decisions sharpen. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to rush. Because you are no longer reacting to the moment. You are leading it. This is the first threshold of leadership. Before vision, before influence, before responsibility for others, self-control. If you can't govern yourself, nothing else holds. If you can, everything else becomes possible, and that leads us to the next layer. Because once self-control is established, the next challenge is learning what to do with the emotions that still arise. Not by suppressing them, not by expressing them impulsively, but by mastering them. And that is where real authority begins to take shape. Chapter 2. Master your emotions. Before they decide for you. Emotions are powerful, but power without direction is dangerous. Leadership does not require you to eliminate emotion. It requires you to stop letting emotion make decisions on your behalf. Every day, emotions rise automatically. Anger, frustration, anxiety, excitement, doubt. They appear before logic, before reason, before intention. If you follow them blindly, they will decide your tone, your timing, and your actions. And once that happens, leadership is no longer in your hands. This is why emotional mastery is not optional for leaders. It is essential. Uncontrolled emotion creates inconsistency, and inconsistency destroys trust. People can adapt to strict leaders. They can adapt to demanding leaders. They can even adapt to difficult leaders. But they cannot adapt to unpredictable ones. When emotions run the show, behavior becomes unstable. One day calm, the next reactive. One moment reasonable, the next impulsive. And people begin to walk on eggshells. That is not leadership, that is emotional management, forced onto others. Real leadership begins when emotions are felt, but not obeyed. There is a difference between feeling anger and acting from it, between noticing fear and surrendering to it, between experiencing pressure and becoming it. Emotion is a signal, not a command. The problem is not emotion itself. The problem is identification. When you say, "I am angry," you fuse with the emotion. When you say, "Anger is present," you regain distance. That distance is power. Because the moment you create space between yourself and emotion, choice returns. And choice is the core of leadership. Leaders do not react faster. They react later, after clarity replaces impulse. This is where emotional mastery actually lives. Not in suppression, not in expression, but in regulation. Regulation means you allow the emotion to exist without allowing it to control behavior. You do not deny it. You do not dramatize it. You observe it, and observation changes everything. When you observe an emotion, it loses authority. When you obey it, it gains control. This is why calm leaders feel powerful, not because they lack emotion, but because they are not owned by it. Their calm is not passivity, it is command. Calm under pressure communicates something profound. I am not overwhelmed, I am not rushed, I am not threatened. And people respond to that energy instinctively. Emotional mastery also determines how much damage you do or prevent during critical moments. One emotional outburst can undo months of credibility. One uncontrolled reaction can fracture trust permanently. One impulsive decision can create consequences that outlive the moment. Leaders understand this. They know that the highest leverage moments require the lowest emotional volatility. This is why silence is often the strongest response. Silence gives emotion time to burn off. It gives clarity time to surface. It prevents regret. You do not lose authority by pausing. You gain it, because pause signals control. When pressure is high and emotions spike, most people feel an urgency to act immediately, to say something, to fix something, to defend themselves. Leaders resist that urge. They slow down when others speed up. They lower their voice when others raise theirs. They choose restraint when others choose release. And that contrast is felt immediately. Emotional mastery also begins internally, long before others are involved. It starts with noticing your patterns. What triggers you? What consistently pulls you off center? Where do you lose objectivity? These patterns are not weaknesses. They are data, and data allows you to prepare instead of react. When you know your emotional patterns, you stop being surprised by them, and when you are not surprised, you are not controlled. Preparation is one of the quiet advantages of leadership. You do not wait to feel calm. You build systems that create calm. You structure your days, you protect your sleep. You limit unnecessary stimulation. You reduce decision fatigue. These are not productivity habits. They are emotional regulation strategies, because a dysregulated nervous system cannot lead effectively. This is why emotional mastery is not just mental. It is physiological. Your body influences your reactions long before your mind does. Leaders who ignore this burn out, snap or spiral under pressure. Leaders who respect it stay steady. Emotional mastery also means choosing your battles carefully. Not every emotion needs expression. Not every irritation deserves attention. Not every provocation requires a response. Discernment is emotional intelligence in action. When you respond to everything, you dilute your authority. When you respond selectively, your responses carry weight. People notice this. They learn that when you speak, it matters. They learn that your reactions are measured, not automatic. And over time, that predictability creates safety. Safety creates trust. Trust creates influence. This is why mastering your emotions is not about control for control's sake. It is about responsibility. As a leader, your emotional state affects more than just you. It sets the tone, it shapes the environment, it impacts performance. When you regulate yourself, you regulate the space around you, and that is leadership. So the practice is simple, but demanding. Notice emotion without obeying it. Pause before responding. Lower intensity before making decisions. Choose clarity over release. Each time you do this, you reinforce authority inside yourself first. And slowly, something changes. You feel less reactive, more grounded, more deliberate. You stop being pushed around by internal storms, and when the internal stabilizes, the external follows. Because leadership is not about eliminating emotion. It is about mastering it. And once emotion is no longer in control, discipline can finally take its place. That is the next layer. And it is where leadership becomes consistent, regardless of mood, energy, or circumstances. Chapter 3. Discipline is stronger than motivation. Discipline is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not depend on how you feel when you wake up. And that is exactly why it works. Motivation is emotional energy. It rises and falls. It responds to comfort, excitement, and external validation. Discipline is different. Discipline is structure. It is commitment without negotiation. Leadership cannot be built on something that disappears the moment pressure appears, and pressure always appears. This is why discipline outlasts motivation every single time. Motivation feels powerful in the beginning. It creates momentum, it creates excitement, it creates the illusion of change. But motivation is reactive. It needs conditions to be right. Discipline does not. Discipline functions when conditions are wrong, when energy is low, when confidence is quiet, when no one is watching. That is where leadership is actually formed. A disciplined leader does not ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "What needs to be done?" And then they do it. Not perfectly, not heroically, but consistently. Consistency is what separates discipline from intensity. Intensity is impressive for a moment. Consistency is impressive over time. Leadership is not proven in bursts. It is proven in patterns. This is why disciplined leaders feel reliable. You know what to expect from them. You know they will show up. You know they will follow through, not because they are superhuman, but because they do not depend on emotion to act. Discipline also creates internal trust. When you repeatedly do what you said you would do, something subtle changes. You begin to trust yourself. That self-trust is quiet, but it is powerful. It removes hesitation. It reduces internal conflict. It stabilizes decision-making. A leader who trusts themselves does not second-guess every move. They move forward with clarity, even when outcomes are uncertain. Without discipline, self-trust erodes. You start making promises you don't keep. You start negotiating with your own standards. You start explaining instead of executing. And slowly, confidence becomes performative instead of grounded. Discipline reverses that. It replaces internal noise with internal order. This is why discipline is not restrictive. It is liberating. When your actions are governed by discipline, you stop wasting energy on internal debates. You stop bargaining with discomfort. You stop needing constant reassurance. You simply act, and action creates clarity. Many people believe clarity comes first, then action follows. In reality, disciplined action often creates clarity. You do not wait to feel ready. You move, and readiness catches up. This is one of the hardest truths for people to accept, because discipline requires doing things before you want to, before you feel confident, before you feel inspired. But leadership demands that exact capability. A leader cannot wait for ideal emotional conditions. Decisions still need to be made. Standards still need to be upheld. Direction still needs to be given. Discipline ensures that leadership does not collapse during emotional droughts. It also sets the tone for everyone around you. When people see that you operate from standards instead of moods, something shifts. They stop trying to manage your emotions. They stop guessing where you stand. They start aligning with your consistency. This reduces friction, it increases trust, and it creates psychological safety. People perform better under disciplined leadership not because it is softer, but because it is predictable. Predictability creates stability. Stability allows focus. Focus produces results. Discipline also sharpens judgment. When you are undisciplined, you tend to overreact. You compensate. You swing between extremes. When you are disciplined, you respond proportionally. You conserve energy. You make cleaner decisions. This is because discipline trains patience. Patience is not waiting passively. It is the ability to hold your ground without forcing outcomes. Leaders who lack patience rush decisions. They seek relief instead of resolution. They confuse urgency with importance. Discipline slows that down. It teaches you to act deliberately, to choose timing instead of speed, to value alignment over appearance. This is especially important under pressure. Pressure exposes habits. It does not create them. When pressure hits, you do not rise to your potential. You fall to your level of discipline. This is why disciplined leaders remain effective in chaos. They are not improvising. They are executing patterns they have already trained. Those patterns might look simple from the outside, but simplicity is the result of refinement. Discipline removes excess. It removes unnecessary reactions, unnecessary words, unnecessary movement. What remains is precision. Precision is another form of authority. People trust leaders who move precisely, who speak deliberately, who act without wasted motion. Discipline also requires boundaries. You cannot be disciplined if everything is optional. You cannot lead if your standards are flexible under discomfort. Discipline means deciding in advance what you will not negotiate. Your schedule, your commitments, your non-negotiables. When those are clear, decisions become easier. You no longer ask, "Should I?" You ask, "Does this align?" Alignment replaces debate. This is how leaders conserve mental energy. They reduce choice by increasing standards. And that conservation matters. Leadership is demanding. If you waste energy on indecision and inconsistency, you will have nothing left for what matters. Discipline protects your energy. It directs it instead of dispersing it. And over time, discipline reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries. You start seeing yourself as someone who does. That identity shift is powerful, because identity drives behavior more than intention ever will. Once discipline becomes who you are, leadership becomes natural. Not forced, not performative, not exhausting, just steady. This does not mean discipline is easy. It means it is worth the effort. There will be days when discipline feels heavy, when resistance is loud, when shortcuts look tempting. Those moments are not signs of failure. They are moments of leadership training. Each time you choose discipline over comfort, you reinforce authority inside yourself first. And that internal authority always shows externally. Because people can sense when your actions are anchored, when your direction is stable, when your leadership is not dependent on mood. Discipline makes that possible. It is the invisible structure holding everything together. And once discipline is in place, leadership gains something critical. Standards, not abstract values, but lived rules. Rules that guide decisions when emotions rise. Rules that shape behavior when no one is watching. That is where leadership becomes unmistakable. And that is where we go next. Chapter 4. Standards create authority, not titles. Authority does not come from what you are called. It comes from what you consistently uphold. Titles can be given, positions can be assigned, but authority is earned, and it is earned through standards. Standards are the rules you live by when no one is enforcing them. They are the lines you do not cross, even when crossing them would be easier. They are the expectations you place on yourself before you place them on anyone else. Without standards, leadership becomes hollow. You can give direction, but it won't carry weight. You can make decisions, but they won't inspire confidence. You can hold a role, but you won't command respect. Because people don't follow words, they follow consistency. Standards create that consistency. A leader with weak standards sends mixed signals. One day something matters, the next day it doesn't. One moment, discipline is enforced. The next moment, it's ignored. That inconsistency erodes trust faster than any mistake ever could. People don't need perfection from a leader, but they do need predictability. Standards make behavior predictable. They tell people what you tolerate and what you don't. They clarify what is acceptable and what is not. They remove ambiguity. And ambiguity is the enemy of authority. When standards are unclear, people test boundaries, not out of malice, but out of uncertainty. They are trying to understand where the line is. If the line moves, authority weakens. This is why standards must be internal before they are external. You cannot expect discipline from others if you excuse yourself. You cannot demand focus if you tolerate distraction. You cannot enforce accountability if you constantly renegotiate your own commitments. Leadership begins with self-imposed standards. What time you wake up, how you speak under pressure, what you finish even when motivation fades, what behavior you do not justify. These details may seem small, but leadership is built from small, repeated signals. Every time you hold your standard, you send a message. First to yourself, then to others. That message is simple. This matters. And when enough things matter consistently, authority forms. Authority is not loud. It doesn't need to explain itself. It is felt. People sense when a leader has standards because there is alignment. Words match behavior. Decisions match values. Expectations match actions. This alignment creates confidence. Not emotional confidence, but structural confidence. The kind that holds under stress. Standards also protect leaders from emotional decision-making. When standards are clear, you don't decide in the moment. You follow what you have already decided. This removes pressure. Instead of asking, "What should I do right now?" you ask, "What is the standard here?" Standards simplify leadership. They reduce complexity. They reduce negotiation. They reduce internal conflict. And they reduce the likelihood of regret. Many leadership failures happen not because people didn't know better, but because they abandoned their standards under pressure. Pressure reveals standards. It doesn't create them. If your standards disappear when things get difficult, they were never standards. They were preferences. Preferences change. Standards don't. This distinction matters. Leaders who operate on preferences feel unstable to others. Leaders who operate on standards feel grounded. Grounded leaders create trust. Trust allows people to relax. And when people relax, they perform better. Standards also shape culture. Whether you intend to or not, people mirror what you allow. If you allow lateness, you teach lateness. If you allow excuses, you teach excuses. If you allow inconsistency, you normalize it. Culture is not what you say. It is what you tolerate. This is why strong leaders are often misunderstood. From the outside, they may seem strict, reserved, uncompromising. But what they are actually doing is protecting clarity. They are removing confusion. They are reducing friction. They are creating an environment where expectations are clear. Clarity is kindness in leadership. Unclear standards force people to guess. Clear standards free people to focus. Standards also require courage. It is easier to bend a rule than to enforce it. It is easier to avoid discomfort than to uphold consistency. It is easier to explain than to maintain a boundary. But every time you bend a standard to avoid tension, you pay for it later, with authority. Short-term comfort often creates long-term instability. Leaders with strong standards accept short-term discomfort to protect long-term trust. They are willing to be misunderstood briefly rather than ineffective permanently. This is not rigidity. It is responsibility. Standards should be firm, but not arbitrary. They should be grounded in purpose, not ego, not control, not image. Standards exist to support performance, integrity, and direction. When standards serve those ends, people respect them, even if they resist at first, and over time, resistance fades. Because consistency teaches, people adapt to what does not change. This is why leaders who constantly adjust to please others lose authority. They teach people that pressure works, that persistence will be rewarded with compromise. Leaders who hold standards teach a different lesson. They teach reliability. They teach fairness. They teach that expectations apply equally. That equality matters. Nothing undermines authority faster than double standards. When rules apply to some but not others, trust collapses. When exceptions are frequent, credibility disappears. Strong leaders are not harsher on others, they are harsher on themselves. They hold themselves to the same or higher standards. This creates moral authority. Moral authority is stronger than positional authority. People may obey a title, but they respect integrity. Standards are the visible expression of integrity. They show that you live by something beyond convenience, and that is why people follow, not because they have to, but because they want to. Standards also stabilize identity. When your standards are clear, you don't reinvent yourself daily. You don't shift based on mood or approval. You know who you are. That stability is grounding. It reduces anxiety. It reduces overthinking. It reduces the need for validation. You don't ask, was that okay? You ask, did that align? Alignment replaces insecurity. This internal alignment is what makes leadership sustainable. Without it, leadership becomes exhausting. You're constantly adjusting, explaining, correcting. With it, leadership becomes simpler, not easier, but cleaner. Standards do the heavy lifting. They guide behavior when emotions rise. They anchor decisions when clarity fades. They protect authority when pressure intensifies. And over time, they define you. Not by what you say, but by what you never compromise. That is why authority is not granted by titles. It is built through standards. And once standards are firmly in place, leadership gains something essential: clarity. Because standards without clarity can still feel rigid. But clarity transforms standards into direction, and direction is what allows leadership to move forward with confidence, purpose, and calm. That is the next step. Chapter 5. Clarity comes before confidence. Confidence is often misunderstood. Many believe it is something you feel first and then act from. But in leadership, confidence is rarely an emotion. It is a byproduct, and the source of that byproduct is clarity. When your mind is clear, your actions are steady. When your actions are steady, confidence follows naturally. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but quiet certainty. Clarity is knowing what matters and what does not. It is understanding direction without needing constant reassurance. It is being able to move forward without explaining every step. Leaders who lack clarity often try to compensate with intensity. They speak more, they move faster, they project certainty they do not actually feel. But intensity cannot replace clarity. And over time, people sense the difference. Unclear leaders feel restless, they overthink, they hesitate, they change direction frequently. Not because they are incapable, but because their internal landscape is noisy. Noise destroys confidence. When the mind is crowded, decisions feel heavier than they need to be. Every option competes for attention. Every outcome feels equally risky. This creates paralysis or impulsive action meant to escape discomfort. Neither is leadership. Clarity removes that weight. When you are clear, decisions simplify. Not because they are easier, but because they are aligned. Alignment reduces friction. You no longer ask, "What should I do?" You ask, "What is the next aligned action?" That question changes everything. Clarity also stabilizes communication. A clear leader speaks with precision. They don't ramble. They don't over-explain. They don't hedge every statement. They say what needs to be said and stop. This brevity is not arrogance. It is confidence rooted in understanding. People trust clarity. When instructions are clear, people feel secure. When expectations are clear, people perform better. When direction is clear, people commit more fully. Unclear direction creates anxiety. Anxiety erodes performance. Performance issues then get mislabeled as motivation problems. But the issue was never motivation, it was clarity. Clarity also affects how you handle uncertainty. Leadership does not mean having all the answers. It means knowing which questions matter. A clear leader does not pretend certainty where none exists. They acknowledge what is unknown without losing direction. This balance is critical. Pretending certainty creates fragility. Acknowledging uncertainty while maintaining direction creates trust. People do not expect leaders to be omniscient. They expect them to be grounded. Grounded leaders know their priorities. They know their values. They know their non-negotiables. And when those are clear, uncertainty does not destabilize them. Clarity also prevents emotional hijacking. When you are unclear, emotions fill the gap. Fear exaggerates risks. Doubt magnifies obstacles. External opinions gain too much influence. Clarity acts as a filter. It allows you to hear input without being swayed by it, to consider feedback without surrendering direction, to adapt without losing identity. This is one of the most important leadership skills there is. Clear leaders are flexible without being unstable. They can adjust tactics without abandoning principles. They can listen without losing conviction. That balance is rare, and it comes from clarity. Clarity is not a one-time achievement. It is a discipline. You must regularly remove mental clutter. Unnecessary commitments, conflicting priorities, unexamined beliefs. Mental clutter creates hesitation. Hesitation erodes confidence. This is why leaders who try to do everything struggle to lead anything. Focus is a function of clarity. When everything matters, nothing does. Clear leaders are selective. They choose fewer priorities and commit deeply. This selectivity is not limitation. It is leverage. By saying no more often, their yes carries weight. Clarity also sharpens self-trust. When you understand why you are doing something, resistance weakens. When you know your direction, external doubt loses power. You stop needing validation. You stop needing constant confirmation. That independence is confidence, not emotional bravado, but internal alignment. Alignment between values and actions, between intention and behavior, between long-term vision and daily decisions. When alignment is present, confidence feels calm. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're simply moving forward. Clarity also reveals where you are undisciplined. Confusion often hides avoidance. If you feel unclear about something important, ask yourself, is the issue lack of information or lack of commitment? Many people seek clarity as a way to delay action. They want certainty before moving. Leaders understand that clarity often comes after commitment. You move, you observe, you adjust. Action refines clarity. Waiting rarely does. This does not mean acting recklessly. It means acting deliberately with the best information available. Perfection is not clarity. It is avoidance dressed as precision. Clear leaders accept incomplete information. They make decisions anyway, and they take responsibility for the outcome. Responsibility strengthens confidence. Avoidance weakens it. Clarity also strengthens boundaries. When you are clear about your priorities, distractions become obvious. When you are clear about your standards, compromises become visible. You no longer negotiate with everything that demands attention. This conserves energy. Energy conservation is critical for leadership. Burned out leaders lose clarity first, then patience, then discipline. Clear leaders protect their energy by protecting their focus. They do not overconsume information. They do not entertain unnecessary conflict. They do not react to every signal. They choose what deserves attention. That choice is clarity in action. Clarity also changes how others perceive you. People feel secure around clear leaders. They know where they stand. They know what is expected. This reduces tension, and reduced tension allows collaboration. Unclear leaders create anxiety, not because they are bad, but because ambiguity is stressful. Clear leaders remove that stress. They create environments where people can focus on execution instead of guessing. That is leadership at scale. Clarity also deepens resilience. When challenges arise, and they will, clarity reminds you why you are moving forward. Without clarity, obstacles feel personal. With clarity, obstacles feel procedural. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" You start asking, "How do we move through this?" That shift is powerful. It turns problems into processes. Processes can be improved. Emotional reactions cannot. Clarity brings leadership out of the emotional realm and into the structural one. And structure is where consistency lives. Confidence built on clarity does not fluctuate wildly. It does not depend on praise. It does not collapse under criticism. It remains steady. Not because the leader feels fearless, but because they know what they are doing and why. This is the kind of confidence people trust. Not loud, not aggressive, not defensive, just grounded. And once clarity is established, leadership gains the ability to pause. Because you are no longer rushing to prove anything. You are responding from understanding. That pause is powerful. It separates leaders from reactors. It creates space for better decisions. And that space, between stimulus and response, is where the next layer of leadership is forged. Because clarity prepares you to stop reacting. And reaction is the final thing leadership must outgrow. Chapter 6. Stop reacting. Start responding. Reaction is automatic. Response is intentional. That single difference separates followers from leaders. Reaction happens fast. It is emotional. It is driven by habit, fear, ego, or urgency. Response takes a moment longer, but in that moment, leadership is born. Most damage in leadership does not come from bad intentions. It comes from fast reactions under pressure. A sharp reply, a defensive tone, a rushed decision, a premature conclusion. None of these come from clarity. They come from reactivity. Leadership requires something rarer: the ability to pause. That pause is not weakness. It is not hesitation. It is control. When you pause, you interrupt the automatic cycle. You stop emotion from turning into behavior without permission. And that interruption changes outcomes. Reacting feels productive because it releases tension. Responding feels uncomfortable because it requires restraint. But relief is not leadership. Direction is. Leaders choose direction over relief. Reaction seeks to discharge emotion. Response seeks to resolve the situation. This is why reacting often creates more problems than it solves. It escalates conflict. It spreads tension. It creates consequences that outlast the original trigger. Responding does the opposite. It lowers intensity. It clarifies intent. It keeps authority intact. This difference is felt immediately by others. People can sense when a leader is reacting. There is urgency, defensiveness, excess energy. They can also sense when a leader is responding. There is calm, deliberation, grounded presence. That presence changes the room. It signals stability. And stability is one of the strongest forms of leadership there is. Leaders who react quickly often believe they are being decisive. But decisiveness without clarity is just speed. Speed does not equal leadership. Timing does. Responding allows timing to enter the equation. It gives you space to consider impact, to weigh consequences, to choose words instead of spilling them. Words spoken in reaction are difficult to take back. Actions taken in reaction are difficult to undo. Leaders understand this. They know that one controlled response can prevent weeks of repair. This is why restraint is not passive. It is preventative. Responding also preserves dignity. When you react, you are pulled into the emotional field of the moment. You lose altitude. You fight on the same level. When you respond, you stay above it. You do not deny the emotion. You simply refuse to be dragged by it. That refusal communicates strength, not force, not dominance. Strength. People follow those who remain composed when tension rises, because composure signals capacity. If you can manage yourself, people trust you to manage situations. This is especially important in moments of disagreement. Disagreement is inevitable. Conflict is unavoidable. But escalation is optional. Reactive leaders escalate unintentionally. They take things personally. They defend their ego. They interpret challenges as threats. Responsive leaders listen first, not because they agree, but because understanding precedes resolution. Listening slows the situation down. It removes assumptions. It creates space. That space allows better decisions to emerge. Responding also protects focus. Reaction scatters attention. It pulls you into side battles. It drains energy. Response conserves energy. It keeps attention on what actually matters. Leaders who react constantly become exhausted. They're always putting out fires, always addressing symptoms. Leaders who respond strategically address causes. They ask, what is really happening here? What matters most right now? What outcome am I aiming for? These questions cannot be asked in reaction. They require pause. And pause requires discipline. This is where earlier principles come together. Self-control makes pause possible. Emotional mastery keeps intensity in check. Discipline prevents impulsive action. Standards guide behavior. Clarity directs response. Without these foundations, responding feels impossible. With them, it becomes natural. Responding also changes how you experience pressure. Pressure feels overwhelming when you believe you must act immediately. When everything feels urgent, nothing is prioritized. Response introduces hierarchy. It allows you to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between noise and signal, between emotion and reality. This distinction is critical. Leaders who react treat everything as a crisis. Leaders who respond know that most things are not. They conserve urgency for moments that truly require it. That conservation builds credibility. When you finally do act decisively, people listen. Because they know you are not reacting out of impulse. They know your actions are considered. Responding also improves communication. Reactive communication is often excessive. Too many words, too much justification, too much explanation. Response is economical. You say only what is necessary. You choose words carefully. You leave space for others to process. This economy creates authority. People trust leaders who speak with intention. They sense that words are chosen, not leaked. Responding also means accepting that not everything needs a response. Silence is sometimes the best response. Not avoidance, not suppression. Strategic silence. Silence allows emotions to settle. It prevents escalation. It creates reflection. Leaders who are comfortable with silence are rarely reactive. They do not rush to fill space. They do not rush to defend themselves. They do not rush to control perception. They understand that presence speaks louder than immediacy. This comfort with silence comes from internal stability. If you are uncomfortable internally, silence feels threatening. If you are grounded, silence feels neutral. Responding also strengthens boundaries. When you react, you allow others to set the tempo. They provoke, you respond immediately. When you respond intentionally, you set the tempo. You decide when and how to engage. This shift is subtle but powerful. It moves leadership back into your hands. You are no longer being led by external stimuli. You are leading your engagement with them. This autonomy is critical. Without it, leadership becomes reactive management. With it, leadership becomes deliberate direction. Responding also creates long-term trust. People may disagree with your decisions. They may not like every outcome, but they respect consistency. They respect fairness. They respect restraint. These are qualities associated with response, not reaction. Over time, people learn that emotional outbursts do not move you, that pressure does not rush you, that provocation does not control you, that learning changes behavior around you. People communicate more clearly, they escalate less, they prepare better. Because your response pattern shapes the environment. Leadership is not only about how you act, it is about what your actions train others to expect. Reaction trains chaos. Response trains order. Order creates efficiency. Efficiency creates results. Responding also reshapes your internal experience. You feel less drained, less regretful, less reactive. You experience pressure without being consumed by it. This internal calm compounds over time. You become harder to destabilize, more centered, more deliberate, and that internal state becomes your leadership signature. Not aggression, not speed, not volume, but composure. Composure under pressure is rare, and rarity creates influence. This is why responding is not a technique. It is an identity. You become someone who responds, someone who chooses timing, someone who values outcome over release, someone who leads moments instead of being carried by them. And once you stop reacting, something important becomes possible. Consistency, because reactions change with mood, but responses follow standards. Consistency is the bridge between leadership and trust, and that bridge is what we cross next. Chapter 7. Consistency builds trust in yourself. First, trust is not built through intensity. It is built through repetition. People do not trust what you say once. They trust what you do again and again. This is why consistency is one of the most powerful and underestimated forces in leadership. A leader can be talented and still untrusted, charismatic and still unreliable, visionary and still destabilizing, because talent without consistency creates uncertainty, and uncertainty erodes trust. Consistency is what turns potential into credibility. When your actions align over time, people stop questioning your direction. They stop bracing for change. They stop preparing for unpredictability. They relax. And when people relax, they focus. Focus is where performance lives. Consistency begins internally. Before others trust you, you must trust yourself. Self-trust is not a feeling, it is an outcome. It is earned by keeping promises you make to yourself, by following through when no one is checking, by acting the same in private as you do in public. When you break commitments to yourself, something weakens, not visibly, but structurally. You hesitate more, you second-guess decisions, you look outward for reassurance. Inconsistency creates internal noise. That noise shows up externally. A leader who does not trust themselves compensates. They over-explain. They seek approval. They change direction frequently, not because they are incapable, but because their internal foundation is unstable. Consistency stabilizes that foundation. Every time you follow through, you reinforce identity. You become someone who does what they say. That identity is powerful. It reduces friction. It simplifies decisions. It strengthens resolve. Consistency also removes emotional dependency. When you act consistently, you stop relying on motivation to move. You move because it is who you are. This frees you from mood-driven behavior. Mood is unpredictable. Identity is not. Leaders who operate from identity feel steady, even when circumstances are not. This steadiness is contagious. People mirror consistency. When leadership is erratic, people become defensive. They hedge. They protect themselves. When leadership is consistent, people align. They know what to expect. They know where the line is. They know how decisions will be made. This predictability is not boring. It is grounding. Grounded environments produce better results than volatile ones. Consistency also creates fairness. When rules are applied evenly, trust increases. When expectations are stable, resentment decreases. Nothing destroys morale faster than inconsistency. One person is held accountable, another is excused. One standard applies today, another tomorrow. This breeds cynicism. Consistent leaders avoid this trap. They apply standards regardless of convenience, regardless of personal preference, regardless of pressure. This does not mean rigidity. It means integrity. Integrity is consistency between values and behavior. People respect integrity even when they disagree with decisions, because they sense coherence. Consistency also protects leaders from burnout. Constant adjustment is exhausting. Reinvention is draining. When you are consistent, you do less emotional labor. You're not constantly recalibrating your stance. You're not negotiating with every situation. You operate from a stable center. That stability conserves energy. Energy conservation is critical for leadership longevity. Burned-out leaders become reactive. Reactive leaders become inconsistent. Consistency breaks that cycle. It keeps leadership sustainable. Consistency also sharpens judgment. When behavior is patterned, deviations stand out. You notice when something truly requires attention. Without consistency, everything feels urgent. With consistency, signal separates from noise. This clarity improves decision-making. You stop chasing short-term fixes. You commit to long-term direction. That commitment builds momentum. Momentum built on consistency is quiet but powerful. It does not spike and crash. It compounds. Over time, small, consistent actions create massive impact. This is true internally and externally. Internally, consistency builds self-respect. Externally, it builds credibility. Both matter. A leader who lacks self-respect eventually loses external respect. A leader who has self-respect radiates confidence without effort. Consistency also trains discipline. Each time you repeat aligned behavior, resistance weakens. What was once difficult becomes automatic. This automation frees cognitive space. You no longer debate basic standards. You no longer question foundational actions. They are simply how you operate. This allows you to focus on higher-level leadership challenges. Strategy, vision, direction. Without consistency, leaders get stuck managing basics. Consistency elevates leadership capacity. It also reduces emotional volatility. When actions are predictable, emotions stabilize. You're not constantly dealing with regret, or cleanup, or repair. You experience fewer emotional spikes because fewer mistakes are made impulsively. This emotional stability reinforces earlier principles. Self-control becomes easier. Emotional mastery becomes natural. Discipline becomes identity. Standards hold. Clarity remains intact. Responses replace reactions. Consistency ties everything together. It is the thread running through all effective leadership. Without it, principles remain theory. With it, principles become behavior. Consistency also changes how others engage with you. People prepare more, they communicate more clearly, they respect boundaries because they know inconsistency will not rescue them. This accountability improves performance. It also improves relationships. Consistent leaders are easier to work with, even when they are demanding. People value fairness more than comfort. Consistency provides fairness. It also builds long-term influence. Influence built on charisma fades. Influence built on consistency endures. Charisma may attract attention. Consistency retains it. This is why quiet leaders often have the deepest impact. They are not impressive in moments. They are reliable over time. Time reveals leadership. Consistency passes that test. There is also a deeper layer. Consistency aligns you with reality. Reality rewards what is repeated, not what is attempted once. Leadership is subject to the same rule. What you do occasionally does not define you. What you do consistently does. This truth is uncomfortable, but it is liberating because it means leadership is accessible. It is not about rare moments of brilliance. It is about ordinary moments handled the same way again and again. That is within control. Consistency returns power to daily choices, small choices, repeated choices, often unnoticed choices. Those choices build trust, first in yourself, then in others. And once trust is established, leadership no longer needs enforcement. People follow willingly because trust removes friction, and friction is the enemy of progress. Consistency removes friction. It smooths movement. It stabilizes direction. It strengthens influence. And once consistency is in place, leadership gains something final. Presence, not forced presence, not performed presence, but presence that comes from alignment between who you are, what you do, and what you uphold. That presence is unmistakable. And it leads us to the final chapter, because when consistency becomes identity, leadership no longer needs noise. It moves quietly, with focus, with restraint, with strength. And that is where true leadership is fully formed. Chapter 8. Become the person others want to follow. Leadership reaches its highest form when it no longer needs to convince. No persuasion, no pressure, no performance. People follow because of who you are, not because of what you demand. This is the point where leadership stops being something you do and becomes something you embody. At this level, influence is not forced, it is felt. Presence replaces persuasion. People sense it before you speak. They notice it in how you enter a room, in how you listen, in how you remain composed when others are unsettled. This presence is not charisma, it is coherence. Coherence between thought and action, between values and behavior, between words and silence. When these elements align, leadership becomes natural. People are drawn to stability. In a world of noise, urgency, and emotional volatility, calm authority stands out immediately. Not because it demands attention, but because it does not need it. This is why true leaders rarely explain themselves excessively. Explanation often signals insecurity. Presence signals certainty. The more grounded you are internally, the less you feel compelled to justify externally. People trust that. They may not always agree, but they feel safe following. Because safety in leadership does not come from comfort. It comes from predictability, integrity, and restraint. Becoming someone others want to follow does not require perfection. It requires congruence. You do not need to have all the answers. You need to be steady while searching for them. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be regulated in the presence of fear. You do not need to dominate. You need to remain centered when challenged. This centeredness is magnetic. It signals maturity. Immature leadership seeks control. Mature leadership holds space. Holding space means you do not collapse under emotion, yours or others. It means you can hear disagreement without taking it personally. It means you can maintain direction without rigidity. This balance is rare. And rarity creates influence. People follow those who make situations feel manageable, who reduce chaos instead of amplifying it, who simplify instead of complicating. This is why calm leaders are often underestimated at first. They do not posture, they do not rush, they do not assert dominance. But over time, their steadiness becomes undeniable. When pressure hits, they remain composed. When conflict arises, they do not escalate. When uncertainty spreads, they ground the room. And people remember that. They remember who held their center when things were unstable. That memory creates loyalty. Leadership built this way does not rely on position. It survives loss of title. It survives change of environment. Because it is not tied to role, it is tied to character. Character is the ultimate leadership asset. It is what remains when authority is removed. Character is revealed in how you treat people when nothing is at stake, how you respond when you are not being observed, how you behave when silence would be easier than integrity. These moments define leadership far more than public wins. People may admire success, but they follow character. This is why leaders who chase image lose influence over time. Image requires constant maintenance. Character compounds quietly. Becoming someone others want to follow also means letting go of control. Control creates compliance. But compliance is fragile. It breaks when pressure increases or supervision disappears. Influence creates alignment. Alignment endures. Aligned people move in the same direction because they choose to, not because they are forced to. That choice is rooted in trust, and trust is earned through consistency, restraint, and fairness. Earlier chapters built the foundation for this moment. Self-control gave you command over yourself. Emotional mastery stabilized your inner world. Discipline removed dependence on mood. Standards created integrity. Clarity provided direction. Response replaced reaction. Consistency built trust. This chapter is the result of all of that. You no longer try to lead, you simply lead by how you move through the world. Your actions are quieter now, more deliberate, more selective. You do not engage in unnecessary battles. You do not chase validation. You do not overextend. You choose carefully where to invest energy. This selectivity sharpens presence. People notice when your attention is not scattered, when your words are few but precise, when your silence feels intentional. This intentionality creates gravity. People lean in, not because you are louder, but because you are clearer. Becoming someone others want to follow also requires humility, not performative humility, but grounded self-awareness. You know your strengths. You acknowledge your limits. You take responsibility without collapsing into self-criticism. This balance builds respect. Arrogance repels. Insecurity exhausts. Grounded confidence attracts. It tells people, I know who I am. I know what I stand for, and I am not threatened by challenge. That message is powerful. It frees others to show up honestly, to speak clearly, to take responsibility. Leadership multiplies at this level because you are no longer the center of everything. You are the anchor. Anchors do not move constantly. They hold. Holding creates stability. Stability allows growth. This is how leadership scales, not through control, through presence. Presence also requires solitude. Leaders who never sit with themselves lose clarity. They become reactive. They absorb too much noise. Strong leaders protect time alone, not to escape, but to recalibrate. Solitude restores perspective. It sharpens standards. It quiets internal clutter. This inner work is invisible, but its effects are unmistakable. People feel when a leader is internally aligned. They feel it in decisions, in tone, in timing. Timing is especially important. Leaders who rush signal anxiety. Leaders who wait signal confidence. Waiting does not mean inaction. It means discernment. Knowing when to move and when not to is a hallmark of mature leadership. That discernment comes from deep familiarity with yourself. You know your triggers, your patterns, your tendencies. And because you know them, they no longer control you. This self-knowledge is freedom. It allows you to lead without being dragged by impulse. It allows you to stay true under pressure. It allows you to act from identity rather than reaction. At this point, leadership becomes quiet strength, not intimidating, not theatrical, just solid. People trust solid things. They lean on them. They build around them. and eventually they follow them. Not because they are told to, but because it makes sense. This is the ultimate form of leadership, not dominance, not persuasion, not authority by force, but influence through being. You become the example, the reference point, the standard. And when that happens, leadership is no longer something you chase. It is something others recognize. Naturally, instinctively, without explanation. That is what it means to become the person others want to follow. And once you reach that point, one truth becomes clear. Leadership was never about controlling others. It was always about mastering yourself until your presence spoke louder than your words ever could. Leadership was never meant to be loud. It was never meant to be dramatic. And it was never meant to begin with others. It begins with you. Not with what you say, but with what you tolerate. Not with what you demand, but with what you practice. Not with how you appear, but with how you regulate yourself when no one is watching. Throughout this audiobook, one truth has repeated itself in different forms. Leadership is built from the inside out. You learned that self-control is the first form of leadership because without it, nothing holds. That emotional mastery is essential because emotions will always rise, but they do not need to decide. That discipline outlasts motivation because leadership cannot depend on mood. That standards create authority because integrity is more powerful than titles. That clarity comes before confidence because direction stabilizes action. That responding is stronger than reacting because restraint preserves control. That consistency builds trust because repetition creates credibility. And finally, that real leadership emerges when you become someone others naturally want to follow. None of these principles are complex, but they are demanding. They ask you to stop outsourcing responsibility to circumstances, to stop blaming emotion for behavior, to stop waiting for confidence before acting. They ask you to lead yourself, daily, quietly, repeatedly. This kind of leadership is not rewarded immediately. It does not generate applause. It often goes unnoticed at first, but over time, it compounds. People begin to feel your steadiness. They sense your restraint. They trust your direction even before you speak. And that trust changes everything. You stop needing to convince. You stop needing to explain. You stop needing to control outcomes aggressively. Because your presence does the work. Leadership becomes less effortful. Not because you care less, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. You are aligned. And alignment is powerful. It allows you to move through pressure without being consumed by it, to face conflict without escalating it, to make decisions without second-guessing every step. It gives you the ability to remain calm when others rush, clear when others panic, steady when others fracture. That is not talent, that is training, and it is available to anyone willing to practice it. So here is the invitation, not as motivation, but as direction. Lead yourself in small moments, in how you pause before reacting, in how you keep promises to yourself, in how you uphold standards even when it would be easier not to, in how you choose clarity over noise, in how you respond instead of release, in how you act consistently, especially when no one is checking. These moments may feel insignificant. They are not. They are where leadership is forged. You do not need a title to begin. You do not need permission. You do not need an audience. You only need the willingness to take responsibility for your internal state and act accordingly. Because once you can lead yourself, everything else changes. Your decisions sharpen, your relationships stabilize, your influence deepens, and leadership stops being something you chase. It becomes something others recognize, quietly, naturally, without force. So remember this, especially when things feel uncertain, overwhelming, or chaotic. Before you lead a team, before you lead a family, before you lead a vision or a future, lead yourself first. Everything else follows.